Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Social Club at the End of the World. And today's topic is 24 Hours of Reality. And I'm joined here by Jason and Doctress Newtopia. Good morning. Great to see you both. And Doctress, I'm going to let you kick us off since you've been watching maybe 12 hours or so of the 24 Hours of Reality. Tell us what you're seeing, what you think, and then we'll have an open discussion and commentary.
Well, Al Gore has been doing this show, 24 Hours of Reality, and he has brought in a lot of interesting people to interview. He has young people who are responding in social media. He has musicians that are devoted to stopping climate change or adapting to climate change. And he has other artists who are also in the show. It's been really impressive to me, and it certainly shows you what the medium of satellite communication can do, because he's interviewing people. He interviewed the mayor of Poland. He has interviewed economists. He has interviewed the new Prime Minister of New Zealand, all talking about what they are doing in their particular location to address climate change and to move forward with the Paris Agreement. And that is to lower emissions to zero by the year 2050. So I'm totally impressed with the organization of this and how he has brought in the global community to address this question. He asked 3 questions. Al Gore does his slideshow every hour, particularly focusing on whatever part of the world that hour is focused on. So the questions that he is asking is, must we change? Of course, he says yes. Can we change? Yes, and he shows examples throughout the world of people who are changing the world towards a solar civilization. And will we change? And he says, yes, we will change. So he has a different message than Dr. Guy McPherson, who we have discussed on this show before. I think there's one more question that needs to be addressed by Mr. Gore, and that is, how must we change? Now, Gore is assuming that this present economy is the way to change. So he's not really looking at different economic systems as much as he's using the capitalist model in order for this change to happen. So they're retrofitting the current situation that we have developed over the millennia. For example, before coming, while I was watching the show being broadcast from England, he showed one of these ancient cathedrals and how they're putting solar energy on the cathedral. They need the solar power in order to run the organ and the lights in the cathedral. Well, this is retrofitting the old. And they're saying, okay, this is how the new and the old are coming together. But, you know, I really feel, at least how I want to use my energy is inventing something new that builds a new kind of infrastructure. And I think that's where my attention is going, even though I applaud what Mr. Gore is doing. So that's a brief summary.
Doctors, thank you so much. And as you can see on the screen here, I'm just screen sharing the live 24 Hours of Reality program, just so people can get some images and visuals while we talk on for a few minutes, because it's got some really good visuals going on. But I thought you said some things that were very profound, and I can't see you guys right now. So Jason, please just jump in whenever you're ready, buddy. You've got priority. But in the meantime, really profound, like when you were talking about the case of, oh, you know, well, we need to power this, this, and this. Why don't we just change the power source fuels to solar? And at first, you know, you hear that and it's like, yeah, that's right. Well, consider the following question, right? You've got billions of television sets pulling up gobs of energy, right? And you could say, well, what's currently powering those now? Well, it's a combination of fossil fuels, coal, nuclear, whatever, a tiny little bit of solar. What if we powered all those television sets with solar? But then I think, but our question is, we need billions of television sets in the first place. That's all based on this old model that, you know, every person, you know, needs to have their own TV, and every person needs to have their own McMansion, or a family of 3 has to have a big McMansion. And they need, well, of course, they need 2 or 3 television sets, one for the kid in the kids' room, one for the kitchen, one for the living room, et cetera, et cetera. We're saying, hey, what Doctors is saying is, let's invent a whole new modality of living. So instead of billions of television sets, hundreds of millions, you know, let's cut the number of television sets by 10, you know, by a factor of 10. And in an arcology reality, so like in an arcology, you know, a couple, 2 or 3 big TV rooms, you know, one for people who want to watch news, another for people who want to watch a movie, you know, movie night or whatever, and another for people who want to watch some documentary, and it would be scheduled. And that way you watch stuff and you consume stuff in community. Like right now we're looking at this thing as a community. And so the arcology, for me, the whole concept of arcology, which you have pioneered, Doctorus, in a big, big way, and you've been a radical transformational leader in the realm of arcology. Arcology is a great platform for many, many kinds of transformations in agriculture, in food preparation, in living arrangements, in energy usage. And it's of course designed to be, you know, self-sufficient. That's the concept of an arcology. And rather than, yeah, anyway, I think I've made my point. So I'm just kind of blabbering at this point. So somebody help me out and just jump in when you're ready.
Al Gore is, if you look at the visuals right now, he is doing his slideshow on what we need to address. Yeah. And you can see from this image, since 1950, it's the boomers that have really caused the problem. And he even addresses this, like when the young people realize that it's the boomers that have done this big, big problem, they're going to hate us unless we really make a radical change for their future. So it's not looking good, you know, as far as how we're going to end our lives with the next generation unless we make this radical shift into a new way of living.
I was going to say that I see where you're trying to go with what you're saying, Jamin. And I thought what I sort of wrote down here was Dr. Shutopia was talking about retrofitting, sort of how they're retrofitting old buildings, and how she would like to see there be a new arcology and sort of build everything new based on a new sort of new principles and a new system. And I could sort of agree with that. I just feel like we have so many buildings in the world already. I don't see why we can't physically retrofit things in the meantime to get somewhere, because it's going to take a long time to sort of replace all the buildings that have been built throughout history. And some buildings, like an old church, people aren't going to really want to tear that down if you tell them this doesn't go, you know, I mean, it's ancient. We can't even build something like that anymore. I think that the point that maybe bothers you about retrofitting is just the idea of retrofitting capitalism and retrofitting the existing social and economic system to fix the problem that a lot of people here on this thing, a lot of people in the world feel like a lot of the problems were created by capitalism. So retrofitting the system that's already broken is not going to solve all our problems. So I think physically retrofitting things, bringing solar power in is a necessity. But the question I think maybe is, is retrofitting capitalism and retrofitting the current, governmental agencies and democracy, so-called democracy we have here in the United States, retrofitting that system, is that the way to go about it? Or do those systems and ideas need to be completely redone or redeveloped to suit the future?
Amen. Hallelujah. Absolutely. And so if I'm not interrupting you, Jason, jump in with, did you say what you needed to say?
Yeah, I got it out there. What do you, yeah.
So let me propose kind of a radical synthesis that addresses pretty much everything you just said, which is, hey, we don't necessarily have the time or resource to tear down all these existing structures and then rebuild something new. Is that we don't need to tear down anything to build these new arcologies. We could build arcologies and incorporating existing structures. So let me just clarify. So if you say, oh, let's retrofit these existing buildings to be more solar powered, that to me sounds like your criticism of retrofitting capitalism, because if the existing structures, buildings, etc., are all used in the same modality of capitalism, that's really only going a 10% of the way. But to take it all the way, form our entire set of living arrangements, but we say, okay, what structures, what buildings, what neighborhoods, what infrastructure do we have in place? Incorporate those into this new arcology of living arrangements. So it's kind of like building an arcology on top of the existing strata, rather than bulldozing the existing strata and building a new arcology off of a clean slate. And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that there's several stages of the transformation. Al Gore is one phase of it. And getting the industry retooled to build solar panels and alternative energy is certainly one. Then we move into a different economic system based on a digital currency. As we live off of the free energy from the sun, that gives us a different concept to base our economy on. So I think that there are different phases of this transformation. Now, places like in the islands in the Caribbean, who have just been wiped off the map, they have to start from zero. And there is talk about building a different infrastructure. In places like Africa, they call it leapfrogging. So they don't do what the Industrial Revolution does. They want to leapfrog over that to go to the next industrial revolution of the solar energy movement. I think, but what we need now is just to leapfrog over our current civilization and these places that have been destroyed because of climate change. And these refugees need a completely different kind of shelter. And that's what I would like to see happen. and how you finance it, how this comes about. Perhaps, you know, at some point, Al Gore will start getting the message that we need to build anew.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, so getting to Al Gore's leadership, clearly, I would say right now, this moment, Al Gore is leading the world more than any other single human being.
What do you agree?
That's a pretty profound statement, because, you know, the United States government is just imploding. And so, and its leadership is imploding at all levels. So he is stepping up and, you know, working outside of the existing governmental system, though he was inside of it for decades, the world. And so we're looking at Al Gore, we're listening to him, we're talking about him, lots of other people are, and I think this will only grow. And so I think this is a great way to start the conversation. Positive, it's got great visuals, it's all around the world, it's a 24-hour thing. So this, and then let it grow with conversations precisely like the one we're having of, hey, what are the real radical changes that we need? And for me, there's two biggies that need to be in the next phase, and we need to get to them very, very quickly. That's why we're talking about them here. One of them is transforming our entire set of living arrangements, not just the source of energy to power the billions of TV sets, but living arrangements that require far fewer TV sets, communal living, et cetera, et cetera. Same with food, same with transportation, same with so many different areas of life. And then the other big area, so transforming our entire set of living arrangements, including transforming the entire global economy, including transforming the very mode of production of the global economy itself. The other big area is geoengineering, including notably geoshading, dimming down the sun, the amount of solar energy that hits the earth that's overheating us because of all the accumulated greenhouse gases that we still don't have a solution for, and that none of this really addresses within the time scale that they need to be addressed, right? We're addressing emissions, but how do you sequester down? How do you reduce that which has already been emitted? Even if we completely stop emissions right now, with the greenhouse gases that we've got in the atmosphere currently, we're cooking. And as Jason mentioned, we've got wildfires now in Southern California in the middle of winter, which, you know, is unprecedented. So anyway, that's my point. Transform entire set of living arrangements radically, replace capitalism. Greed is good hoarding. You know, a new set of living arrangements and new arcologies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And B, geoengineering, including geoshading. Whoever wants to jump in next.
So, I could agree with you, but kind of coming back to an idea of this show and Al Gore, you were saying that he's looking very much like a leader. And I just want to say I agree with that, because I think he looks more like a leader doing this type of stuff, dealing with the issue that's the biggest issue that we're going to face in the future. He's acting like a real leader in comparison to Donald Trump, who's not a leader at all. I mean, and I won't go down that path, but I was also thinking about how this is also about like retrofitting the consumer culture. And so, obviously Al Gore is going to put this in a media type of package that is desirable to Western people and Americans. And if he were to come out and say, we need to get rid of some of your televisions and have a communal room where you all go to watch the same television, I bet you most American consumers would think you're fucking nuts. You know, we'd rather see the end of the world than have to share a television with our neighbors.
Yeah, go on. You're on fire, Jason. Rock on.
I think in the future we'll have either glasses that we can see whatever we want, hook into the internet, because we're becoming cyborgs anyway. It's as far as Jason or Jamin, you talking about geoengineering. Well, Al Gore in this show has not brought in NASA and what NASA could do, and the planetary sensors that they have access to now to look at the vital life signs of the planet. So, I mean, that dimension needs to be out there, that the outer space connection and using very sophisticated space-age technologies to help with this problem. And that takes planetary cooperation. And Al Gore right now, because of this, he's tapped into a very deep global problem. And that's why that people feel so deeply about him and this movement. So I think this is totally making things so that perhaps we do have a future. And Al Gore stepping out of traditional politics and into organizing on a global level is, I think, a brilliant step that he made.
Yeah, totally, totally. And, you know, to video here, so I'm kind of seeing it sort of like a rocket that's bound to get out of the atmosphere, to free itself from Earth's gravity. And let's say it's a three-stage rocket. The first stage is, you know, the really, you know, big one that gets it off the ground and gets it up to a certain elevation. But then when it burns out, you go into stage 2 and then stage 3. So the way I'm looking at 24 Hours of Reality, it's a really good stage 1. Right? It kind of gets us started. It gets people together, thinking positive, thinking globally, observing the reality of what's happening. Because the reality of what's happening, I don't think Al Gore is trying to sugarcoat the reality of what is happening, right? Now, we think he's falling short in terms of the solutions that he's proposing, but in terms of identifying reality, I'd give him about an A, right? Maybe an A- or a B+, because he's not bringing in the methane part of it, nor the exponential climate change part. So let me change that to a B to a B+ for illuminating reality. And then in terms of transforming our entire set of living arrangements and geoengineering, the two components that I addressed, I'd say he's getting about a grade of a D, right? Because he's basically talking about how do we retrofit capitalism, right? How do we maintain our current set of living arrangements where you can go anywhere you want, whenever you want, and watch what you want, and do what you want, and have a big house, and whatever. He's just retrofitting all that. And what we need is radical transformation, communal living, regenerative agriculture, way less travel, right? I mean, unless it can be done by bicycle or foot or, you know.
Or Hyperloop.
Or Hyperloop, yeah, you know, maglev trains, whatever. But, you know, something far more efficient. Anyway, what I'm saying is transform our set of living arrangements so that we stop killing our nest. We stop fouling our nest and destroying our nest, and making our nest go extinct. So that's the... So really what we're talking about is stage 2. So we're applauding Al Gore for stage 1. Thank you so much for getting the world together and doing this. Now let's talk real reality and the absolute necessity and urgency of transforming our entire set of living arrangements and doing the geoengineering that we need to do, right? Solar panels ain't going to cut it. You know, water filtration systems and rainwater catchment systems ain't going to cut it. We need radical.
So I want to mention one thing. You know, Doctor said something about how she's surprised he didn't bring in NASA yet and interview some people from NASA. I've thought a lot recently about how we have this big movement apparently in our country of flat earthers, like people who like literally think that NASA's all full of shit. It's all a giant conspiracy connected with the Illuminati, or who knows what they think, and the world's actually flat. And then Elon Musk posted something about how, well, if there's a flat Earth society, why is there no flat Mars society? And someone from Flat Earth Society said, well, that's because we can observe that Mars is round or is a sphere, but we can't do the same of Earth. And you're just like, wow, how fucking stupid are these people? But I want to point out though that it's interesting because that's maybe such a polarized idea in this country. Like literally, maybe the right in this country, a lot of the religious type of people, I think, are behind this flat earther thing. A lot of religious type of people who believe that science is shitting all over their Bible or whatever.
Yeah.
And they view it as attack on their religion, science.
Yeah.
And yet, this is one of the biggest problems that I think we're having. Carl Sagan said something about this, about how we have a society and a culture based on science and technology, yet the people leading the world, our government and the people running corporations, don't even understand science and technology. So maybe he feels that if he brought NASA in with all this stuff, that people would be like, oh, well, now it's definitely a liberal hoax. Now I can't fucking listen anymore because this must be bullshit because you brought NASA on. So it's kind of sad to think that Americans maybe are that freaking dumb that you have to treat them like fucking children when you do a media bit about climate change.
Yeah. These are really good points. I've heard this flat earth thing from, very conservative friends who are climate change deniers. And I sort of see it as a way that it's almost like a terrorist tactic they're doing to dynamite the whole legitimate climate change conversation by saying, oh, that's all completely wrong because that's based on a round earth. And if the earth's not even round, then that proves that it's a big hoax. Right. And, so I'm just kind of cartoon summarizing your point, Jason, because I think it's a really good one. So, and this is a sign of the desperation that humanity is in right now, that we're reaching for such ridiculous paradigms as a flat earth. I was out kayaking day before yesterday and observing, the curvature of the earth. So anyway, and then, so, but but I think, but your larger point is, hey, he's not bringing in NASA or any of that stuff because he doesn't want to isolate the people that would immediately turn off. Because one of the cool things about this phase one that he's doing is it's really grounded in reality, the reality of what's happening on the grounds, the floods, the droughts, the wildfires, the starvation, this and that. And so because of that, again, he's getting people together. He's not touching on all the things he needs to touch, but it's only phase one. And then, I think it's up to all of us to help build phase two.
Jamin, it would be so great if you could work with Al Gore.
If we could work with
Al Gore.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Maybe we could contact.
Go ahead.
I think maybe she's saying maybe we should try to contact Al Gore.
And we can do that. But I actually believe that one of the most effective ways of contacting Al Gore, exactly what we're doing right now, which is doing a program that builds off of it, good phase one, and starts to map out what we need for phase two. Because here's the thing, everyone in the world is reaching out to Al Gore right now. His phone is ringing off the hook. A while to get through, or us a while to get through. But that's why I say doing what we're doing is a really effective way to build off of his excellent phase one and start to build the phase two of the rocket ship.
Yeah, and
that's what we're doing.
It'd almost be interesting to hear in comments when you actually post this video. People could put comments down about what they think about, Al Gore's new actions here, and as well as what they think that phase two is. Yeah,
exactly. So this will be on YouTube, and as soon as we stop recording, I'll post it, the link, and let everyone comment. Let's send it out there and say, hey, we're Al Gore's excellent 24 Hours of Reality. Now let's talk phase two and phase three to get there ASAP. Things are really collapsing quickly right now. This is exponential climate change. All these solar panels and whatnot are just the beginning. We need to really start talking radically.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the most radical thing I saw on his show, on the 12, 13 hours I watched it, is he focused on the school in Australia. And one of the teachers took his training. You know, Al Gore has this climate change training. That's where he's getting all these people that know so much, and they can go out in their communities and give the slideshows. Well, anyway, this one woman, a teacher, has started a climate change focused school, elementary school. And it was so wonderful that he is basing the education on the science, or she is basing the education training of these young people on the science of climate change. And they're working for there to find solutions. Every school in America should become a climate change focused school. Every university should be a climate change focused university. And that is the basis of our transformation here in the United States. When our educational system takes on this climate change and starts to think in the phases that we have just discussed.
Totally. Totally. So for example, just to give, you know, a concrete example of the kinds of stuff that we're talking about in terms of radical change, this is what is on my that the University of Washington published last week, feature article about me and the movement I'm leading here in the state of Washington in a daily newspaper. That's all on my Facebook. Is I talk about the highway to hell that we're on right now. And, you know, I'd say Al Gore is doing a pretty good job of identifying this and saying, yes, this is the highway to hell that we're on. I am proposing and actually leading is an off-ramp from the highway to hell centered around the elimination of crime. And this in turn is one pillar of a three-stage, kind of like there's three different off-ramps that we're working on. This is the out with the bad. Out with the bad. The bad is crime, organized crime, including organized crimes against Mother Earth. We need to have out. We need to get out with the bad, in with the good. That's the healing. Smart, and that's collective intelligence. So I just wanted to flash this on the screen, not to deviate from the 24 hours of reality, but just to say these are the kinds of radical solutions that we are talking about, and that Doctress in Utopia, your point is every university, high school, etc., around the world should become focused on climate change, and I totally agree.
The question is, how do we sort of get there? If you know, if Al Gore's 24 hours of reality is one step in sort of the media, kind of getting some real media out there by credible people to sort of start waking people up. I guess one question that could go in there is, do people then get a false sense of security that, oh, Al Gore is going to take care of it all, so we don't really need to worry about this climate change thing. Thank God. You know, we wouldn't want that to happen. I think that just because we see this Al Gore thing doesn't mean that all the schools and universities in America and in the world are going to change into climate focus. But I agree they should, because, you know, if Guy McPherson is right and it's literally right around the corner, and we've got things like this picture that you got up on the screen right now with everything burning. I mean, if that's the world is literally on fire right now, shouldn't every single human being, especially young people who have more creative minds than older people who are stuck in their thought patterns and stuck in their systems, get those young people, you know, creating the systems of tomorrow? But the corporations that run University America, you know, the institutions, they don't want people thinking for themselves. They just want them to be cogs in their corporate machinery. And so Al Gore's thing may sort of fit into, you know, the tech giants that have whoever the tech people are who gave them all this money to run this thing. I'm assuming it's, you know, clean energy corporations and whatnot.
I think it's like so many things. He has found a way to work within capitalism to convince these capitalists that they're going to make a lot of money on this transformation of moving into the solar economy. And that's why he's successful. That's why people on the left who have more radical ideas that are not working within the capitalist model, why they don't get their voices out there. You know, and this is just a real tragedy that we don't have more of a marketplace of ideas where we can put on the table all the different alternative ways of dealing with it. So now we have Al Gore, who has worked within the system. He has a global reach, and that's it. That's you know, he's become, you know, like we have said, the voice of reason on this problem. And he's able to gather all these different people together to talk on behalf of the planet.
Yeah, and just again to emphasize, what we are doing right here, right now, is an example of the kind of new media that expands the conversation and builds on top of phase one. So the answer is right here, right now, what we're doing. This is a part of the answer, not just that the three of us are going to come up with the solutions, but that as the world begins to engage in this conversation in a systematic way, platforms like Radical Collective Intelligence, which we're pioneering, that's the Let's Get Smart, the three-legged stool, out with the bad, in with the good, and let's get smart. So we are the change right now. We're doing it. So you're doing great. Rock on, everyone.
Well, I think I'm going to say goodbye for now because I want to go back to the show.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I'm kind of fascinated in the show myself. So, Jason, do you also want to get back to the show? That's totally cool if you do.
Yeah,
certainly been.
I mean, I feel like it would be interesting for both you, Jamin, and me to look at it a little more. We could always post this up and look at what comments people may have by next week on Tuesday, and we could go at it again after we've watched a little more. I think one thing we've sort of pounded out is that, you know, if Al Gore is on, you know, the sort of retrofitting capitalism kind of crunch, we're the type of people who need to create the sort of cultural revolution, or really making people wake up to the fact that maybe the consumer culture of the United States that we've gotten used to, of everybody needs to have their own phone and own car and own TV and their own little box to live in, and should never talk to their neighbor or live inside of a functioning democratic community, that these are all part of the larger problem, and that the culture really needs to be changed. You know, we shouldn't be so isolated from each other, and we should be sitting down and talking about the problems of the world and talking about solutions for those problems, instead of just watching Al Gore tell us about the problem and never coming together to do something about it. If we ever did get Al Gore's attention, it would be interesting to ask him, like, hey, I think that capitalism may be a large part of the problem. Not to say that there maybe isn't a place for markets in the future.
Yeah.
I don't like to sound like a total Marxist person who get rid of the entire capitalist system, but maybe, you know, larger swaths of things do need to be, you know, privatized and run by communities. And so, you know, we can come together on an idea about that, but, you know, the problem may be also our consumer culture, you know? And so I think there may be really a mental transformation that needs to go on to get people to live in the way the new world will go. I guess a question to everybody who's watching this could be, do they think that just through the retrofitting of capitalism and these systems like what he's talking about, if we just put solar panels everywhere, and wind turbines everywhere, but we keep the same shitty, financial system that we have to bail out every 10 years when there's another collapse because the people who run it do shady shit. Is that sustainable? I don't think so. I don't think that most people do. So we obviously need a new system, a new financial system, a new economic system, a new way of culturally looking at things, a new story, a new cultural story.
That's it. Yeah.
So,
and this whole thing with Bill Gates, so far he hasn't brought Bill Gates on the show that I know of. But Bill Gates and his smart city, I would really be interested. I'm really interested in his development plans for that, and putting pressure on him to radically shift what he develops.
Yeah.
Because he's our billionaire. He's our billionaire. There are other cities that are being done from scratch in China, in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia. But Bill Gates is our billionaire now. And I don't know how if he's working with Al Gore, what's going on here.
Bill Gates epitomizes the problem, right? Of greed is good, hoarding, separation, and may talk a good talk about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working on malaria or whatever, but most of his time on is how does he make more money? This new modern city in Arizona, it's based on the old model of separate family home units. And if there's one thing that's really the driver, the engine, the devil in this picture, one feels like they're separate from everyone else. They need to carve out their own chunk of land, chop down all the trees on that chunk of land, build a house, farm the rest of it, using traditional modern agriculture, which is another major destroyer. It's this whole concept of separation, that we're all separate from each other, and that we each need to hoard our own land and resources and cars and buildings and solar panels and whatever else we can hoard. It's fundamentally, it is the very mode of production, which goes hand in hand with our entire set of living arrangements, the individual family home, the individual family car. Oh, now we need 2 cars. Oh, now we need 3 because Junior just turned 16, right? That's the problem. It's separation. It's our whole human culture that's built upon this paradigm of separation.
Well, it's a mother-son relationship. It's the family. It's the basic unit of capitalism. And, how many people really are able to think in a different family structure? That's a big one. That is a big problem. And certainly Al Gore is not addressing that. Most people in our culture are not aware of this. Marxist Engels and Marx did address it. And I think that's where we should look for some inspiration about this.
Yeah, that's all part of. I wanted to interject right here. I was thinking as you two were talking, I think if you've paid any attention to politics in our country right now with the new tax bill that they want to bring in, and that it's going to save people who make over $1 million in this country, it's going to save them $5.8 billion. And it'll bring us something like another $1.5 trillion into debt because they're lowering taxes, yet they always want to increase our expenditures for military usually. And it's going to actually it's going to increase the taxes on the middle class to the lower middle class, who are going to have to pick up the bill for this massive tax break for these wealthy people. It's really this idea of the greed in this country versus the sort of idea of the human family. We're all in this together. And then I see that it's just like tech people, like my friend who's a tech guy who lives in San Francisco is kind of saying this is like the elite, the older elite of the original Industrial Revolution with all the money and power now, sort of lashing out in a way at the new rich, like the tech type people, because they're going to give the people who are really the wealthiest, a lot of them, the original wealthy people, this big tax break, but put the burden on a lot of the people who don't quite get over that cusp of being really wealthy, just rich people, are going to have to pay more taxes. So I see this sort of battle between like different elites, and I would see maybe Bill Gates sort of obviously makes more than $1 billion a year, so he's probably going to get a tax break. Not that he really wants one, but just that there's sort of like a battling between ideals in this country, and these clean energy people are obviously on the side of techie and whatnot, and they seem to be sort of losing. And Donald Trump is maybe just representing older wealth and old power within the oligarchy. I don't know, maybe I'm just going down a wormhole now, but it made me think of those things I just mentioned.
Now, the class divisions are definitely something that needs to be worked out, and Al Gore really is not taking that on. He did have some people that he interviewed that were talking about human rights, and he had a UN person that came in to talk about the poverty issue. Of course, that is a huge issue. Right now, I'm seeing that they're in Brazil. The rate of poverty in Brazil, it's just a rich and poor country. So maybe they're going to be talking about it right now. So yeah, we have to get over the class division, and it seems like to do that, we need to look at what the left wing has to offer us there, and look at some intentional communities that have income sharing. There are a few examples in the world that have done that, and look at more socialist models, how that fits in with the new solar civilization. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to both of you.
Well, actually, before you do, Doctoress, I have a proposal. Let me unmute here. Let's just kind of watch a little of this together.
Okay.
Whenever one of us has something to say, I'll mute it, and then we can talk, and then we go back to watching. It's just a radical idea, since speaking of radical ideas, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, sure, but how long do we want this video to go on? I think they've got to have 4 more hours.
I don't know, but I just say let's try this for a few minutes anyway, okay?
All right, so do it.
And then just speak up if you have something to say.
As ações de fiscalização e de repressão, boa parte desse desmatamento tem sido provocado pelo crime organizado.
Okay, obviously we chose the perfect time since all of us speak Portuguese, as does our audience. Now I'm just going to wait till this guy, and I'll go on unmute.
They probably have a translator there, but we just can't see it.
Maybe let me see if in settings I can get but yeah, because I've got annotations. Anyway, I think they've got a glitch. They should be showing what he's saying.
Yeah.
We'll just keep our eye on it. Now, in the meantime, whenever they show that image again of like, oh, these are all the causes of emissions and everything, the coal burning power plants, transportation, deforestation. See, those are all crimes against Mother Earth. So I'll just flash this on the screen. Against Mother Earth. We need to address those crimes, and we need a strategy for getting rid of them. This is a radical strategy for doing it, starting with eliminating the criminal drug cartels. I just wanted to point that out while this guy's going off in Portuguese.
Fontes de energias renováveis que são utilizadas no Brasil.
Portuguese. So, Something you were just saying, Doctorus. Oh yeah, about going to a more social, bringing in more socialism or socialist elements into the economy. I see that as, direction, just like solar panels are steps in the right direction. But we really need to have a clear picture of a destination, right? Rather than take a baby step here, a baby step there, and then we just find ourselves at the edge of a different precipice. What is the destination we want to get to? Here is characterized by baby steps, more solar panels, chopping down of trees, but still, putting it all is the fundamental beast of greed is good capitalism.
Yeah,
so what they're saying here,
I mean, for me, it's like that our destination is based on a world of universal human rights, a place where everyone has medical care and universal education. That's why the schools based on climate focus is so inspiring to me. So it's all of these utopian ideas of this universal humanity that is our destination. Now the question is what is the structures? What is the infrastructure? What is the architecture? What is the technology? And what is the economy that builds this universal humanity? That's our big question. That's the debate I would like to see happening at universities.
Right. Exactly. And I propose that there's two things that need to be designed. A, we need to design the destination that we want to get to. Actually look like, we need to, not just what does it look like, but its actual design. We need to design it. And then the second thing that we need to design is the transitional pathway from where we are right now. Look at the images on the screen. Greed is good capitalism run amok. How do we transition from where we are now to that newly designed utopian, ecologies and regenerative agriculture and geoshading and all of the above? How do we get there from here? We need to design that pathway. And that's why I spend so much of my time working on collective intelligence platform for generating all of these designs. Designed, including the pathway, flip the switch and start walking down the pathway that's already laid out before us because it was so brilliantly designed by radical collective intelligence.
Well, Gal Gore was one of the advocates of the internet. He called it the information superhighway or something like that in the 80s, early 80s. And I'm sure it's not that difficult for him to understand the concept of collective intelligence. That's why, if you if somehow come together your ideas with Al Gore, maybe this other dimension can happen with the unification of ideas.
So
right.
I mean, what we need is a marketplace of ideas, so that the best practices that humans have come up with are out there, and we can see them, and we can then put them together. And we need really the conductors to do that, as if we're playing a symphony orchestra, putting together these parts in a way that brings harmony to the human race. And I think we need to think in terms of music.
I was going to say I agree with you, Jamin, that we need like a plan and destination and whatnot. I believe we have like a general idea. We have some ideas, like this. Maybe there's going to need to be obviously massive cuts in emissions, but we may also need geoshading because of the, aerosol effect causing warming. If we were to completely just stop, putting emissions into the atmosphere, we'd have this warming. So we obviously have all these issues we know need to be addressed. But I guess at least creating this, this collective intelligence on these different issues, we can get a bunch of different solutions out there and try to choose the best one that makes the most sense.
And there are some great examples, like Buckminster Fuller. He had this idea of a world management committee. And how I visualize that working is that once we realize that climate change is the focus, climate change is the reason why we have developed the internet in order to deal with this problem. So if you imagine coders building the internet with this purpose, and when an individual logs into the internet, they see a globe, and then they see the various production teams that that Buckminster Fuller outlined, and even more other ones. And then the individual would go and they would log in to where their interests lie, whether it's the forestry, reforesting the world production team, or whether it's the solar power production team, or whether it's the clean water production team, or whether it's the architect design team, or the science team, all these different ones. So then you log in to that particular production team, and there you have your experts who are bringing these ideas to the global stage. And then the person would find the various projects that they want to hook into. I mean, that's one idea. Another idea is Jacque Fresco. And he worked with the Venus Project. And he visualized, he was taking off on the ideas of Buckminster Fuller, this global consciousness of global intelligence, and putting it into the supercomputers. So all the data is stored in these supercomputers that are now being used for military purposes and surveillance purposes. Once we reprogram the computers to work for humanity, then we've got the supercomputers with us. And that's where, of course, they should be. Yeah. So I think Jacque Fresco has part of this map as well. I also believe that there is a spiritual component to the crisis, the inner self. And I think the yoga and other, perhaps other traditions have some validity here, especially yoga. Yoga is not a religion. It's kind of the kernel of all religions. One of the oldest spiritual, or the oldest spiritual tradition that humanity has come up with. And from there, we can see an ethical code that needs to be enacted in every single one of us. For example, one of the principles is ahimsa, thou shalt not kill. And once we realize these ethical principles, then we have a way to deal with the corruption within our own selves. Because the corruption is not out there somewhere. The corruption is how we live and the ideas that we hold. Yeah. So there's 2 cents of mine.
Oh, very good, doctors. You've articulated 2 of the fundamental kind of sub-platforms of radical collective intelligence. One is of a matrix of committees and groups, working groups, with all the relevant expertise included, enable us to come up with the various solutions that we need. And then the massive computer system, that's pillars of radical collective intelligence called global holistic modeling. And that's where we do computer modeling and simulation solutions that are proposed and under development so that we can test them in the virtual laboratory implementing them in the real world and rolling the dice and seeing what happens. The simulation part of it. Just to complete the picture, the third leg of the stool of the three-legged intelligence stool, which in turn is one leg of a larger three-legged stool. That's the Let's Get Smart piece, the collective intelligence piece. The third leg is the conversational domain. Well, actually, the conversational domain is the committees of expertise, because they get together and they talk and they come up with ideas. So the third leg is radish.org, which is the GitHub of solutions, where people come together to actually co-create solutions. See, in the conversational domain, howtochangetheworld.org, we're in right now, we talk about the solutions that are needed, aspects, elements, factors, et cetera, we do analysis and all that good stuff. Everything we're doing right now, including watching this video and commenting on it, is within the conversational domain. Then radish.org is the GitHub of solutions, actually building the solutions, and then global holistic modeling. Eshko was pioneering concepts of. That's the modeling and simulation part. So those are all the three parts of radical collective intelligence, which I maintain is going to be vital to the future and all of its components, as well as the future and all of its components. Shall we listen in and see what they're saying? There we go.
Um dos principais desafios aqui do Santa Marta é a questão dos blackouts. Poder perceber que a gente poderia trazer uma solução como essa, dia do sol, a vazia, mas precisa, seria uma solução para esses espaços de uso comum, como a praça que a gente está agora.
I'm going to mute because we can see the words on the screen and none of us speak Portuguese. You know, I'm just going to make a comment on this, which is simply changing the power source of the economy. One can power their televisions and air conditioning units and all that with a new source of power. Ecology. I mean, look at this favela with all the solar power, with all the greenness, with all the plant life and everything. A circle around the entire favela and saying, okay, let's redesign it as an arcology. People keep their same homes, their bedrooms and all that. But, you know, just as one tiny example, instead of everyone watching their own TV set, maybe there'll be certain, you know, rooms where, you know, lots of people can come and watch the same television program like they do in India. See, that will dramatically reduce needed in the first place. Have a community cafe for communal eating, have communal gardens where we grow the food that goes into the community cafes. Basically just transform the entire favela. And I'm just going to unmute until someone starts talking. Once you start talking,
are pretty. They can be an example of community. I was actually there a couple of years ago and took a tour of a favela. They live real close together, and there is a lot of sharing that's happening. So the poor can actually be an example for how to build communities. There you see everything's very close together and walking distance. So it is, you know, maybe a more of a social structure that would that people would be familiar with in order to live in an arcology where people do share resources.
Totally, yeah. So we've got all these great examples out there. We need to put them together and synthesize them. Elements of the design of the utopia where we want to get to, where we need to get to so urgently. You know, again, the radical collective intelligence, starting with the conversational domain where we're in right now, transitioning from there, or passing the baton, so to speak, to the GitHub of solutions where we actually build out the solutions, design them, and then, of course, the testing and simulation phase, which is global holistic modeling. And tying it back to that, because that's the engine that we really need to get revved up. Do this in time. You know, Al Gore is chronicling all these, you know, great, you know, little examples all around the world of change happening here, there, and everywhere. And that's all good. That's all great. It's just not happening fast enough. We're not smart enough. to make this change happen fast enough. And culture, not just of hoarding resources, but hoarding information. Experts who don't share their information because they think if I hoard it, then I can bill myself out at $500 an hour. For people who are desperate for my information, you know, lawyers and doctors are prime examples. Very valuable information, and they dole it out little by little at a very high rates, so that they can continue to get richer and richer. And they squeeze people. They squeeze the poor, like the people in these favelas. They're just squeezing them. And look, and now look at the bottles of alcohol in the lower left, right? That's their painkiller. These are among their painkillers for, you know, dealing with the pain of separation and scarcity and everything else that comes from the fundamental mode of production that we're living in right now. If you want to survive, hoard, hoard, hoard. And if you want to hoard more, you got to chop down all the trees and sell the lumber, oil, and get what you can out of every acre of land so that you and your family can survive. That's the fundamental thing that needs to be transformed.
Primeiro obstáculo é romper essa barreira mental de que algo não é possível, algo não é para mim.
See, this is a solar company that's installing solar panels in Brazil, and you better believe they're one of the sponsors of this because they're making money at this. So, you know, it's like, hey, if we just do this Band-Aid, it makes things better. And that's the grand illusion of this 24 hours of reality, is that if we do all these, you know, small steps here and small steps there, that we'll get to safety. And that is a big lie, huge lie. Because the reality is we need much more radical transformation along the lines of what we're talking about. You see how you see the you see how you see the logo of that solar company all over the place. Action.
The voices of reality.
And the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Reality we need to face. We're talking about on this program, Club at the End of the World.
And now for a broad perspective on the climate movement and the important work that the Climate Reality Project is doing to help people find their voice on the climate crisis, we're pleased to welcome the Climate Reality Project President, Ken Berlin, here on our stage.
Thank you, Ken, for joining us. Was a major milestone, but of course, in the last year, we've had some setbacks here in the United States. All global climate movement stand.
First, in the United States, there's been a tremendous reaction to the president's decision to withdraw from the agreement. Increase in activism by individuals and trying to change the decision. Activism by cities, states, local governments, and businesses are all to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Public has generally said they don't support what the president's done. That leaves us in two positions. First of all, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions no matter what the White House does. And we think that by 2020 and 2025, we will meet all of our commitments under the agreement, no matter what. One of the interesting things about the agreement is draw from the agreement right away. So under the schedule the agreement is set up, draw from the agreement officially until November 4th, 2020. The presidential election is on November 3rd, 2020. But it means that this is going to be a big issue in the presidential election for the first time. If a new president wins to rejoin the agreement, president. So in the U.S. we're making progress, and the rest of the world has stood up. The world has said we are going to continue our commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions no matter what the United States has done. So we think this is a temporary setback that we'll be able to overcome.
Now, the 100% Committed initiative helps campuses and communities energy and creates climate activists along the way, of course. Now, tell us about the momentum in communities committing to go 100% renewable.
Great. You know, the goal of what we're doing to address climate change is to transition away this economy to a clean energy economy. And one way you can do that is by cities and individuals committing to get their energy, 100% of their energy. So we and a number of other groups have started campaigns to get cities to do that. Cities have now committed to renewable energy. We've done that. We have very active efforts on college campuses.
Okay, I'm going on mute because we've heard this all before. Transition to solar, and this is part of the grand illusion and the great lie that by transitioning to solar, we're going to solve our problems. I just wanted to highlight that because it almost makes me want to puke, the fact that, you know, they're talking about this as if this is going to solve the problem. It's not. Yes, it's important, but it's nowhere near enough, as we've been talking about. We need radical transformation.
1,350 trainees. We've now trained over 13,750 reality leaders, and we have even larger trainings planned. One of the things we do as a training is we train people to talk about. And Al Gore spends many hours training people how to do that. We train people how to tell their own personal story so they can explain to people why they care about this issue and the science and the issues involved. There are climate reality leaders, for example, do about go to 3,000 locations where they'll make presentations about climate change to several 100,000 people. Train people to speak shorter programs to their local communities. We have a program that trains people to speak to their peers in the African American, Hispanic, business and youth communities. So we are training many people to go out and engage and speak to people. We'll speak to other people, and we think the amount of activism very markedly.
So what do you hope comes out of these trainings? What are you seeing people do with that, becoming leaders? What are you seeing people do?
Well, our goal is to make people leaders. It means that we think they can go out into their communities, the work that's being done on climate change, the groups about climate change, as an organization is we take our climate reality leaders and we try to get them involved in campaigns designed to submission. So it might be a campaign relating to energy. It might be opposition to a bad piece of legislation. We support a good piece of legislation that incentivizes. So we work closely with our climate reality leaders in their community to be involved in.
And lastly, the Climate Reality Project is asking people to be a voice of reality with the project.
Watching this program, the program to ask us to send them, it has 12 actions that people can take. And we, of course, once we get somebody's name, we'll back them up. We'll send them further information. People can also go to the climaterealityproject.org. They go on our social media list at Facebook or Instagram. Again, we will be in contact with them. We'll get them information. We have branch offices in 10 countries around the world, including in Brazil, in the United States, that people can join. So again, we'll be trying to involve people by mail, but also get them involved at a local level with our climate reality leaders and chapters.
Of the Climate Reality Project. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And now we're going to turn it back over to Caleb Worthy and Van Ness Wu to see what you've been saying.
Welcome to the social media headquarters. We're your co-hosts, Van Ness Wu, and I'm Caleb Worthy. And so last time we asked.
Yeah, I think that this grassroots effort that they're doing, I want to get the kit. I want to see what's in the kit and how, collective intelligence could be added to the kit if it's not already in there. So I suggest that we all try to get the kit and look at it for next week.
Yeah. Let's look at it. And we can analyze that next week. Absolutely.
I'm sorry. How do we get the kit?
I think you go. I'm not sure. That wasn't really clear to me. But you go onto their website, and then you have to apply. I think you have to apply for the kit. So let's see if any of us can get the kit.
Well, I'd imagine that the kit is just a free gift that you get for giving up your website so they can create a list. Because that's what everybody does in America today, and in the capitalist world today, is create a list, all online marketers. So I mean, if they're doing online marketing, they just want to get your email, and then they'll probably send us all the thing. I don't think it's like they won't send it to us, but I don't know what we're talking about exactly.
Well, I think in order to be trained by their program, you have to apply, and then the training is free. You have to pay for your travel and your housing to one of their trainings.
I personally, I don't know if I'd take one of Al Gore's trainings. I was just looking on Facebook, and I think when Jamin talks about getting radical, I just wanted to mention, and maybe I could screen share for a second.
I'll pass you the baton. Give me 1 second. On to you, Jason.
Can you all see this?
Yes, we can. Yep.
So this is like off the 150 near Ojai, California. I guess everybody in Ojai is leaving right now. So this person is actually Josh Tickell, who produced a movie called Fuel about maybe 10 years ago now, almost 10 years. I don't know if either you, Jamin, or doctors have seen it or heard of it. It's called Fuel, and Josh Tickell apparently wrote some books on that, but he drove around the country in a van or in a motorhome type thing that was run on vegetable oil. And he had his own thing, and he would just stop and get the oil from like McDonald's or whatever. And he had this thing to transition it right behind, and he just drove this car to make people aware of biofuels. And then in the movie Fuel, he talked about how in the future we need to get well, so anyways, that's something you can check out. But right now, him and his family are evacuating Ojai, and you can just see it just like looks like hell out there.
This is a picture of the end of the world. Sorry, Jason, go ahead. Yeah, this is a picture of the end of the world.
I mean, it's really amazing. I don't remember if there's ever been fires this late in Southern California. I mean, this is pretty late. This is now December 5th, and these big fires are starting up. It's not a good sign.
Well, no, Al Gore has been talking about this throughout the 24 hours, not about this particular fire, but about what happens to the earth during droughts because of the heat up of the atmosphere. So, I mean, the science is out there. California is drying up. Arizona is drying up. The whole Southwest is. What are we going to do with all our refugees? That's the real thing. And I think that's where I'm focusing on, because we already have 65 million refugees throughout the planet. And many of those are either war or climate refugees. So where do they go? Are we going to put them on the outskirts of New York City or Los Angeles or wherever? That's not where they belong. They don't belong in ghettos. And so that's why we need a city-making movement more than anything else on this planet. And it takes all of our minds in order to do that. And it really takes us to activate the genius inside us to know what is the design with nature.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jamin, for sharing that footage. I mean, it's just terrifying, and especially as it's going on right now with Al Gore's 24-hour broadcast. It's real. It brings it home, and I know Jerry Brown should be watching that too, and thinking on lines of our ecology for the refugees of California.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Jason. I'm going to go back to screen sharing the 24 hours of reality, and even if it looks like something we want to watch or listen to. So I'll just let that be.
Well, they're just going to sing Kumbaya until it all ends.
Yeah, that's right. Let's do it. Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. I mean
that was another interesting thing, was on this guy's Facebook feed. I'm reading the comments, and still 25% of the people were praying for him and his family's safety. And I wonder whether that's something that people really feel like they can successfully do. Well, it's sort of like, oh, you know, we should maybe say in here, now is the time for real climate action. Now is the time for us to actually mobilize and march through the streets and look for climate justice or something, instead of, oh, we'll just pray for you, and I still got to go and do my consumer whore shopping of the day, and, you know, best of luck. And
exactly.
Now, like what it needs to happen is that we need to get beyond normal. We are in extraordinary times. This is a new frontier, and that's an alternative reality. So let's continue to step up to this new reality, this climate change world, all the refugees that have been abandoned by the nation state system, so that we can really act as a global family.
Yep, that's it. That's part of the cultural transformation that we need. And I just want to insert that the cultural transformation is part of the design of the global planetary utopia we're designing for, right? So it's not just transforming our living arrangements, but transforming our very culture, direction of the economy, etc. It's basically everything that we're seeing on the screen here in one way or another.
Well, the interesting thing, Jamin, about the 24 reality show is that I think Al Gore is showing the new global culture. As he goes and interviews people around the globe, their problems are the same. And it just shows us our humanity. And that's the new culture. It's dropping all these traditional points of view that don't serve our survival. And the spirituality of the planet, this love for the planet, is the only thing that counts.
Yeah. Totally.
So I'm gonna have to go for other reasons now too. So I'm gonna say goodbye.
Okay, Doctoress. Jason, do you want to hang in there? I could just let it roll for a minute, and then we can take a break and just let it roll. I mean, it's up to you, Jason, if you want to hang in there.
I gotta run and take care of some things, Jamin. So I think I'm out.
Fair enough. Well, I'm gonna let it slide for a bit, let it roll for a bit, and then I'll be just kind of commenting solo. But really great. I'm just gonna stop sharing for a minute.
I look forward to next week and either talking about this or some other new thing is going to happen that we'll all be talking about.
Yeah, me too. Social Club at the End of the World. Tune in, and if you want to join us, send me a note, and we can include you. This is part of the collective intelligence. Great stuff. Great seeing you both. I'll let it roll for a little bit longer, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you, Doctors. Thank you, Jason. Thank you all for watching. All righty. So going back to screen share, I'm just going to let it roll for a bit. Get a flavor of, well, this is music right now. I'm going to let this roll, and then I'll be back in a few minutes.
Climate change is our biggest challenge yet. The world's getting warmer, seas are rising, and our weather is getting more and more dangerous. Our planet's future is in our hands, and can act and lead the fight to a clean energy future. All across the planet, climate reality leaders are doing just that. They are inspiring people to stand up and take action when it matters. You can join them. Become a climate reality leader and learn what it means to lead a world-changing movement. Former Vice President Al Gore and some of the best scientists and influencers out there. You'll learn the latest on climate science and solutions. Learn how to share it with a message that moves audiences to act. Difference? Become the world changer you know you can be. Become a climate reality leader. Join us this December for 24 hours of reality. Be the voice of change, the voice of the future. Let your voice be the voice of reality. have the technology. We know the solutions. A global agreement is in place. It's now time to use your voice in the fight against the climate crisis. Join us for a journey around the globe as we focus on businesses, leaders, artists, and everyday people who are stepping up, speaking out, and fighting like our world depends on it. Because it does. This is 24 Hours of Reality. You too can be the voice of change, the voice of the future. Let your voice be the voice of reality.
Right now, because I want to comment, they say we have the technology, we know what the solutions are. I challenge that. I don't think we have the solutions. Professor Guy McPherson says there are no solutions. I disagree. I think there are solutions, but I think that they are mostly to be discovered. We need to discover the solutions and create them, design them, and implement them, and figure out and design the pathway for how to get there from here, including geoengineering, geoshading, and transforming our very culture and our entire set of living arrangements. In short, we need to go way more radical. Hours of Reality folks are saying. I think this is largely a promotional thing to promote solar panels and solar energy. You've got all these, like in Brazil and different places, that are showcasing what they're doing. And that's all good, but nowhere near enough. That's my central thesis. So I'm going to just kind of close it up and that's the point. We need truly radical solutions. The folks in Ojai, California, they're on fire. They're evacuating. More and more climate refugees everywhere. Solar panels are simply not going to cut it. We need to address the systematic crimes against Mother Earth and put a halt to those immediately. And solar panels play a part of that, but we need geoshading. We need arcology. We need regenerative agriculture. We need to sequester carbon at a massive scale. So, you know, I'm not trying to poo-poo, but just saying, great phase one. I applaud, and let's get cracking on phase two, stage 2 of the rocket. How do we now initiate radical transformation and really launch the radical collective intelligence that we need to come up with all the solutions that we need, including the pathway to get there? Thank you all so much for watching.